Welcome back to Godless and Grounded. Imagine being told from the moment you could understand words that if you don't believe exactly what you're told, if you question, if you doubt, if you stumble, you'll be punished forever. Not just punished, but burned, tortured, tormented, for eternity. Not for a year, not a lifetime, forever. No parole, no second chances. Now imagine being a child when you first hear this. Imagine trying to sleep at night after hearing that your thoughts, something as simple as questioning a story, could land you in an eternal furnace. That's not love, that's psychological abuse. Let's talk about the fear of hell. Not the theological concept, not what religious books claim, but the real-world consequences of this idea when it's planted into the minds of people, especially children. Fear of hell isn't just a belief, it's a tool, a control mechanism. It's used to shape behavior, to suppress curiosity, to enforce obedience, and to trap people in systems that demand conformity at all costs. And the effect it has on the human psyche is far more damaging than many realize. First, think about how fear works. Fear is a survival response. It's meant to protect us from harm, physical threats, danger, immediate risks. But when fear is artificially inserted into areas that are abstract or unverifiable, like what happens after we die, it becomes a powerful psychological weapon. People can be manipulated not by what is, but by what might be, especially when that might is framed as unimaginably horrific and never-ending. Hell is that threat. And it's not just about hell as a concept, it's about how it's taught. Children are told they'll go to hell if they lie, if they disobey their parents, if they think bad thoughts, if they question authority, if they don't accept a particular version of God. Some are told their friends, parents, or loved ones will go to hell if they don't believe. Can you imagine the weight that puts on a child's shoulders? A young mind, still forming its understanding of the world, suddenly burdened with the thought that their father or mother might be tortured forever. And not just because they were bad people, but because they followed the wrong religion or didn't say a certain prayer. It's psychological torment disguised as moral teaching. We often talk about trauma in terms of abuse, physical, verbal, emotional. But religious trauma, particularly the fear of hell, rarely gets the same attention, even though it fits the pattern. Fear-based indoctrination leaves deep scars. People develop anxiety, depression, obsessive guilt, intrusive thoughts, and even panic attacks, all rooted in the terror that they might end up in eternal torment. This isn't theoretical. It's happening. There are entire online communities full of people who've left religion but still suffer from hell anxiety. They know, intellectually, that it isn't real. But they were taught it for so long, so deeply, that the emotional fear still lingers like a shadow. Let's think about how this fear is used to control people. It's not just about morality, it's about power. When you convince someone that they'll suffer forever if they don't obey, you don't need evidence, you don't need reason, you just need fear. You can make them follow rules that don't make sense. You can make them accept contradictions. You can convince them to police their own thoughts, their own desires, even their natural instincts. The fear of hell creates internal surveillance. It makes people afraid of themselves. That's why so many religious leaders lean on hell as a teaching tool. It's not enough to say, be good. They say, be good or else. Not just because goodness is valuable, but because hell is the ultimate punishment. It overrides empathy. It shuts down questioning. It replaces personal growth with blind obedience. And often, what is considered good is defined by those in power. So hell becomes a tool not of moral teaching, but of authoritarian control. Now think about how hell is used to enforce conformity. If you're gay, you're told you'll go to hell. If you leave the faith, you'll go to hell. If you explore other philosophies, you're flirting with damnation. So what happens? People stay quiet. They suppress who they are. They pretend to believe what they don't. And they suffer silently, afraid of eternal punishment for being true to themselves. This fear stunts emotional development. People raised with hell anxiety often have trouble trusting their own judgment. They were taught that doubt is dangerous, that curiosity is sin, that questions are rebellion, but questions are how we grow. Doubt is part of being human. When you turn those things into reasons for eternal torture, you're not building character, you're building a cage. Let's talk about real-life examples. There are people who leave religion in adulthood but can't shake the fear that they made the wrong choice. Even after years of studying, reflecting, thinking critically, they still wake up at night with cold sweats, fearing hell. Not because they believe it, but because they were traumatized by it. That's what psychological abuse looks like. When something imaginary still holds power over your mind long after you've stopped believing in it. There are children who've gone to therapy because they couldn't sleep, terrified they'd go to hell if they made a mistake. There are adults who stay in toxic marriages, abusive churches, or repressive communities because the alternative, leaving, means risking eternal fire. There are people who've been disowned by their families for leaving the faith, and they're not just cut off socially, they're warned that their souls are now at risk. That kind of emotional blackmail, rooted in fear of hell, breaks people. Some might say, but fear keeps people in line. It stops them from doing bad things. But is that true? Is fear really a good teacher? People don't become more moral when threatened. They become more afraid. Fear doesn't make you kind. It doesn't teach empathy. It teaches you to follow orders. And when the fear is about something you can never see, touch, or prove, like hell, it doesn't guide you, it haunts you. Imagine instead a world where we taught people to be good because empathy matters, because kindness helps, because truth is worth pursuing, not because there's a fiery pit waiting if they don't. That's real morality, not coerced by threats, but chosen from understanding. The idea of hell also creates a moral double standard. People who do horrible things are considered saved because they believe in the right God, while kind, generous people who don't share that belief are supposedly destined for eternal punishment. That's not justice. That's moral absurdity. What kind of system claims to be about love but punishes people forever for finite mistakes or honest doubts? And consider how permanent hell is framed. One life, maybe 70 or 80 years, determines your fate for eternity. There's no growth after death, no redemption, no second chances. That's like giving someone the death penalty for stealing a cookie as a kid. It's not proportionate, it's not fair, and it's certainly not loving. Some might argue that people choose hell by rejecting God, but that's misleading. A choice requires full information and free will. When people are taught from birth that questioning is sin, that doubt is dangerous, and that only one religion is true out of thousands, how free is that choice, really? And when the consequence of getting it wrong is eternal torture, it's not a choice. It's coercion. Let's also think about how this affects relationships. Parents raise kids in fear. Friends worry about each other's souls. People try to save those they love, not out of compassion, but out of panic. Religion that uses hell as a motivator warps love into fear. Instead of respecting others' beliefs, it turns relationships into missions. Instead of accepting people, it demands conversion. That's not healthy. That's fear-based love. And fear-based love isn't love at all. Even when people leave religion, the fear of hell can linger. It's like a ghost in the mind, a voice saying, "What if you're wrong?" And it's no accident. That's how fear works. It digs in. It overrides logic. It leaves marks. Even when you no longer believe the threat, the fear can still make you flinch. In a just world, we'd never tell a child that their thoughts could land them in eternal fire. We'd never use fear to control people's identities or beliefs. We'd never scare someone into obedience with threats of infinite torture. That isn't moral. That isn't love. That's psychological abuse, plain and simple. Religion doesn't need hell to teach good values. If something is truly good, it can stand on its own. It doesn't need threats. It doesn't need fear. When fear is the only thing keeping people in line, you haven't created morality. You've created obedience under duress. So next time someone talks about hell, think about what it really means, not as a theory, but as a psychological weapon, as a trauma, as a story used to terrify, to control, and to suppress. No child deserves to be afraid of eternal fire. No adult deserves to carry that fear like a scar. We deserve better. A world where morality is taught through reason, empathy, and understanding, not through fear. Because fear of hell is not a guide. It's not a teacher. It's a chain. And breaking free from it is one of the most liberating things a person can do. Not just for their beliefs, but for their peace of mind, for their sanity, for their freedom.